waited for my mother's Christmas call that never came, and when I realized my entire family had been invited except me, their eldest daughter, something inside me broke, then rebuilt itself into something they could never control again. If you've ever been the forgotten one, the black sheep, the daughter who was never quite enough, this story is for you. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't getting even. It's building something so magnificent that they finally realize what they lost. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let me tell you how one Christmas exclusion changed everything. My name is Sophia, and I've spent 38 years being the daughter who was never quite enough for my family. But on Christmas they excluded me without a word. That was the night I stopped begging for their approval and started building something they could never ignore. When December rolled around, I waited for the call. You know the one. My mother Martha's annual Christmas planning session, where she'd assign dishes, coordinate arrival times, and remind everyone that family tradition mattered above all else. But this year? Silence. Days turned into weeks. I told myself she was busy, that the call would come. Then my sister Amber casually mentioned during our weekly check-in that she was bringing her famous pecan pie to Mom and Dad's Christmas dinner. My blood ran cold. Wait, I said carefully, my voice steadier than I felt. When is that exactly? Christmas Eve, like always, Amber replied, distracted. Why, aren't you coming? The pause that followed felt like falling through ice. My heart hammered against my ribs as the truth crashed over me. They hadn't invited me. My own parents. My own family. Everyone was coming except me. Oh, Amber said quietly, finally catching on. Sophia, I just assumed... didn't Mom call you? No, she hadn't. I hung up shortly after, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I sat in my ranch's massive living room, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking 200 acres of Montana wilderness, and felt smaller than I'd ever felt in my entire life. I was their eldest daughter. I am 38 years old, the first child they'd ever held, and somehow I had become invisible. The sting cut deeper than any business deal gone wrong, any failed relationship, any public embarrassment. This was my family. The people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, and they had decided, collectively, consciously, that Christmas was better without me. I knew why, of course. I'd always known. I was the daughter who didn't fit their perfect family portrait. While my brother Randy married his high school sweetheart and gave them 3 grandchildren, I built businesses. While my sister Amber stayed close to home, hosting weekly Sunday dinners and holiday craft sessions. I invested in real estate and traveled for work. I had worked brutal hours in my 20s and 30s, clawing my way through male-dominated boardrooms where men like Willie Johnson and Bruce Patterson told me I was too aggressive and not a team player. Code for, you're a woman who doesn't know her place. I proved them wrong. I built 3 successful companies from scratch, invested smartly in properties across the state, and eventually bought this sprawling ranch worth $5 million. $5 million. And none of it mattered to Martha and Joe, my parents. Not one bit. To them, I was still the black sheep, the difficult daughter, the one who chose ambition over family, independence over tradition, success over settling down. At every family gathering, my mother's friends would ask about my siblings first. How are Randy's kids? Is Amber expecting again? Then, almost as an afterthought. And Sophia? Still, working? The word working always came out like a diagnosis. My father Joe would sometimes brag about my ranch to his poker buddies, but never to my face. Never with pride directed at me. It was always transactional. Look what my daughter bought. Look at her success. But there was no warmth behind it. No connection. They were proud of what I had, but not who I was. That night, after Amber's accidental revelation, I sat alone in my ranch and felt the familiar ache of not being enough. Of never being enough, I wanted to call them. I typed out angry messages, deleted them, typed them again. I rehearsed bitter phone calls in my head, imagining my mother's defensive excuses, my father's uncomfortable silence. But I stopped myself. If they thought excluding me was a lesson, that maybe I'd come crawling back, apologizing for being too independent, too successful, too much, Then maybe it was time to teach them one of my own. I stood up, poured myself a whiskey, and looked out over my property. The Montana winter landscape stretched endlessly under a blanket of snow, pristine and untouched. The stables where I kept my horses stood quiet in the moonlight. The guest lodge, a beautiful timber structure I'd built for visitors, sat empty, waiting. An idea formed, small at first, then growing with delicious certainty. If my family didn't want me at their Christmas, I'd create my own. And it would be so spectacular, so unforgettable, that they'd realize exactly what they'd given up when they erased me from their celebration. The next morning, I started planning. I called my friend Julia first. She'd been my college roommate, the one who'd stood by me through every family drama, every painful holiday when I felt like an outsider at my own parents' table. "I need your help throwing the most epic Christmas party this town has ever seen," I told her. Julia laughed. "What's the occasion?" "Revenge." There was a pause, then, "I'm in. What do you need?" The planning consumed me. I hired a premium catering company that usually handled weddings for Montana's elite. I brought in a live band, not just any band, but a group that had played at the governor's mansion. I contacted a lighting company to string thousands of twinkling lights across the ranch, transforming it into something out of a fairy tale. I sent invitations everywhere. Friends I'd lost touch with over the years, colleagues from my businesses, distant relatives who barely spoke to me, but would absolutely talk about this party for years, neighbors from surrounding ranches, even people I'd met once at networking events. The invitation was simple but elegant. "You're invited to celebrate Christmas at Sophia's ranch. Open house, open hearts, open bar. December 24th, 5 p.m. onward." Word spread like wildfire. My phone buzzed constantly with RSVPs. People were curious. Many of them had heard about my ranch but never seen it. Christmas seemed like the perfect excuse. My friend Janice, who owned the local flower shop, called me laughing. "Sophia, everyone in town is talking about your party. Half my customers are asking if they can get an invite." "Tell them yes," I said. "Everyone's welcome. Even your parents?" She asked carefully. I paused. They weren't planning to be in town that night. The lie tasted bitter, but I let it sit. As Christmas Eve approached, I barely slept. Part of me was terrified no one would show up, that I'd be standing alone in my decorated ranch like a pathetic woman trying to buy friendship and relevance. But a deeper part of me, the part that had survived boardroom battles and family rejection, knew this was going to. Worked December 24th arrived cold and clear. The sky was that brilliant Montana blue that makes everything feel possible. I spent the morning doing final preparations, my hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. By 4 p.m., the catering team had transformed my main hall into something magical. Long tables overflowed with food: prime rib, glazed ham, roasted vegetables, artisan breads, desserts that looked like edible art. The bar was fully stocked. The band was setting up near the massive stone fireplace. At 5 p.m., the first car pulled up my long driveway, then another. And another. By 6 p.m., cars lined both sides of the driveway for half a mile. Guests marveled at the stables, the lodge, the enormous Christmas tree I'd installed in the main hall, 20 feet tall, decorated with ornaments that caught the light like captured stars. Julia found me in the kitchen, her eyes wide. "Sophia, there must be 200 people here." "Good," I said, smiling. Laughter filled the air. Glasses clinked. Music played, classic Christmas carols mixed with jazz standards. People wandered through my home, admiring the architecture, the view, the sheer scale of what I'd built. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the forgotten daughter. I felt celebrated, surrounded by people who actually wanted to be there, who chose to spend their Christmas Eve with me. Then, at 8:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Mom?" I stared at the screen, my heart suddenly pounding. For a moment I considered ignoring it. But curiosity won. "Hello? Sophia." My mother's voice was sharp, tight with barely controlled anger. "Why didn't you tell us you were hosting Christmas?" I almost laughed. The audacity of that question, the sheer entitlement of it, hit me like a physical force. "Why would I?" I said calmly, my voice steady despite the rage simmering beneath. You didn't invite me to yours. Silence. Long, heavy, suffocating silence. Then she sighed, and I could hear the gears turning, the excuses forming. It was supposed to be a small gathering, Sophia. We assumed you'd be too busy with your business. We thought maybe you wouldn't want to come anyway. You're always so what, Mom? So independent? So successful? So inconvenient to your perfect family picture? Another silence. Then quietly. That's not fair. Neither is being excluded from my own family's Christmas. I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From power. From the realization that for once I had control. They wanted something from me now. Access. Inclusion. A piece of what I'd created. And I didn't have to give it to them. Within an hour, my father, Joe, called. His tone was different. Uneasy, almost impressed. How many people are there, Sophia? Over 200 now, I said. Why? He whistled low. Seems like you've made quite the Christmas. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch. Your mother's upset, he added carefully. She'll survive. Randy called next, then Amber. Both asking why they hadn't been invited to my ranch party, their voices tinged with guilt they tried to cover with awkward jokes. Because you were already busy with Mom and Dad, I told them simply. The calls didn't stop. Around 10 p.m., distant relatives who'd gone to my parents' small gathering started showing up at my ranch. Apparently, word had spread about the scale of my celebration, and they wanted to see it for themselves. Some even left my parents' table mid-meal to drive out and join us. By midnight, the ranch was glowing with energy. I stood on the balcony overlooking the crowd, strangers and friends, colleagues and neighbors, all gathered in the home I'd built with my own hands, my own work, my own refusal to shrink. I had turned my parents' rejection into something powerful. I didn't need their approval or their table or their validation. I had built my own, and it was overflowing. The next morning, Christmas Day, my phone rang one final time. Mom again, but this time her voice was different, quieter, almost defeated. Sophia, maybe next year we could combine the celebrations. It's not right for the family to be split like this. I smiled to myself, standing in my kitchen surrounded by leftover decorations and empty champagne bottles, and the beautiful mess of a night that changed everything. I'll think about it. Mom, I said, knowing I wouldn't. Christmas had shown me the truth. I didn't need to beg for a seat at their table anymore. I didn't need to shrink myself to fit their expectations or apologize for my success or pretend to be less than I was. I had my own table now. And for once, everyone else wanted to be at mine. From that year onward, the ranch became the new Christmas tradition. Not theirs, mine. My parents had tried to erase me, to teach me a lesson about priorities and family and knowing my place. Instead, they made me the center of everything. And every time I walk past the grand hall where that first party took place, I remember the night the calls started, the night rejection turned into the sweetest kind of revenge. If this story hit home, if you've ever been the forgotten one who built something beautiful out of rejection, drop a comment below. Have you ever turned family betrayal into your greatest triumph? Hit subscribe for more stories where the underestimated become unstoppable. Remember, sometimes the best revenge is building a table so magnificent, they realize too late what they lost when they pushed you out. See you in the next one.